You are listening to the Kelly Confidential podcast with Kelly Wilkes. This is episode 13. Welcome to the Kelly Confidential Show, where we talk negotiation essentials and those crucial conversations empowering extraordinary women. Right, folks. So today's episode is really more of an op-ed rather than a tutorial, but I think there's still a lesson in here. So let's give it a go. Being in the UK, I don't see a lot of the day-to-day American news updates, but I happened to be watching one of the satellite channels on Tuesday night, and they were covering the NBA playoffs. And it caught my attention because the Denver Nuggets, yes, my hometown team, had won the playoffs. Whoop, 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 whoop. It was awesome. And what a triumph it was. Talk about an underdog. If you caught my last podcast where I talked about the underdog, the overlooked, the outlier, well, for years, this was that team. Nearly 50 years in the league, and they had never won an NBA championship. But not this week. This week, they owned the Miami Heat, and they spanked it to win their first ever NBA Finals. 47 years of seriously hard work, sweat and tears, players being scouted, playing their hearts out, and some even retiring from the Nuggets without ever getting to the top of the top. Can you imagine? But not this week. Nope, because Monday night, they smashed it. Can you even feel what it must have been like in that stadium? And the side story, Nikola Jokic, a 26-year-old Serbian who scooped the NBA Finals MVP, most valued player, was the star of the show. And quite rightly. The Nuggets beat the Miami Heat 94-89 in Game 5 of the playoffs, with the Nuggets center Jokic contributing 28 points, 16 rebounds, and 4 assists. Crazy good. Without Jokic, it's hard to imagine the Nuggets would have scored what they did, had the season they did, or indeed been in the playoffs at all. But this wasn't a fluke. Jokic, who was a second-round 41st draft pick by the Nuggets back in 2014, wasn't exactly a ready-made star. They knew he was good and could play ball, but he was young and had to put in some hard graft to get to the colossal levels of greatness he's at today. In his 9-year professional career, he's been named MVP a few times, continues to represent the Serbian Professional Basketball League, with which he won silver in the 2016 Summer Olympics, and has generally proven himself to be a huge asset to the game. And so what kind of investment does that come at? Well, according to the NBA, rookies these days can expect to get $1,017,000 minimum, guaranteed, in their starting year. These are arguably good players, but they are either fresh out of high school or college and green to the whole enterprise and haven't, won any championships at a professional level at that state. And what an enterprise with the average salary for more seasoned players. If we look at the average salary in the 2022-23 NBA season, the average was $9,662,000. I mean, it's enough to make any kid work their backsides off for a shot at a career paying what this career pays. And then you have the WNBA. That's the Women's National Basketball Association. Made up of 12 teams, most of which are considered sister teams to their male colleague counterparts across major cities where often they share the same arenas and can sell out to upwards of between 8,000 and 20,000 seats depending on the game. And so guess what the average WNBA player earns in a 2022-23 season? $102,000. No, I'm not kidding. You can check my show notes for the reference. That is 10% of what a rookie NBA player earns, and possibly a low draft NBA player earns on the male league. And that brings me to the feature of my show today, which is about another basketball star center. Not Nicola, I'm talking about Brittney Griner. Few people will be unfamiliar with her name given the year she had last year following nearly 10 months jail time in Russia and a 9-year prison sentence. But many won't know why she was in Russia and the backstory that nearly destroyed her life and her career. This basketball legend has been on my mind so much this past year, and it brought all of it full circle when I saw the Nuggets win the championship and saw the extreme idolization of a parallel sports star in Nikola Jokic. So many parallels between these two, between Nikola and Brittney. And so my mind goes back to Brittney and why she was in Russia. But let me tell you a little bit about it, and I'm going to go a bit further back. So Brittney was born in 1990 in Houston, Texas, to a stay-at-home mom and a sheriff and Vietnam veteran father. She discovered her passion for basketball very early on, growing up in a very sports-oriented family, which would really serve her ambition and natural talent for basketball. Brittney played both volleyball and basketball in high school, where she established herself as a standout athlete, and her incredible agility, athleticism, and impressive scoring abilities made her a force to be reckoned with. As a result, she earned numerous accolades and led her team to multiple championships, and her ability to dominate both ends of the court was unrivaled. So it was little wonder that Brittney's exceptional performance in high school caught the attention of college scouts across the country, and she ultimately accepted an athletic scholarship to Baylor University in Texas. During her college years, Brittney consistently demonstrated her unparalleled skill and versatility as a player. Her lightning-fast drives to the basket and deadly three-point shooting made her a nightmare for opposing teams. And even the legendary coach Pat Summitt was once quoted as saying that Brittney was a true game changer, someone who can single-handedly turn the tide of a match. Brittney led Baylor with numerous awards and championships. In 2012, she took Baylor to the NCAA championships after an undefeated 40-0 season, and finished her college career with 3,283 points scored, which placed her among the top scorers in NCAA history. In 2013, Brittney was the first round, and first overall draft pick of the Phoenix Mercury. That's impressive. And she did not disappoint. Her tremendous talent and fearless approach made an immediate impact on the court. She quickly established herself as one of the most dominant players in the Pro League, earning the Rookie of the Year award and a spot on the All-Star team in her inaugural season. Her ability to score from anywhere on the court, combined with her exceptional defensive prowess, made her a nightmare for opposing teams, and over the course of the next few years, she became an 8-time WNBA All-Star and 2-time Olympic gold medalist. Off the court, Brittney became an influential and outspoken advocate for LGBT and gender pay and equality in sports, something she routinely spoke and tweeted about, and continues to do to this day. And she knew the topic of gender pay and equality well. WNBA stars are paid a fraction, actually let's call it what it is, a pittance, compared to their male stars. The gender pay gap is a well-known issue in the professional sports world, with women often earning significantly less than their male counterparts, even less than by the corporate pay disparity standards, which is saying something. This gap can be seen across various sports and can vary greatly in magnitude. Here are just a few examples of the earnings disparity between male and female athletes in different sports. So for soccer, according to a study by the Global Pay Index, the pay gap in soccer is amongst the largest of all sports, with female soccer players earning only 7% of what male players earn. And I'll actually come back to this point later. In tennis, while the pay gap in tennis has been decreasing in recent years, there is still a disparity between the earnings of male and female tennis players. At the 2020 U.S. Open, for example, the winner of the women's single tournament earned $3 million, while the winner of the men's singles tournament earned $3.85 million. Same game, same outcome, but one is paid more for his gender. Golf. In golf, of all of the sports, this one has the least pronounced gap compared to other sports, and the LPGA Tour offering equal prize pots to both male and female golfers. It's important to note that the earnings disparity between male and female athletes is not only a result of unequal pay, but also stems from differences in sponsorship deals and media coverage. Add to that is the very expensive matter of travel and the athletes' need for access to highly specialized sports medicine, injury specialists, nutritionists, etc. Now, in the NBA, most of these costs are footed by the teams. And star athlete LeBron James was famously reported to be paying over $1.5 million a year in trainers, sports therapists, nutritionists, and the like, just to make sure he can continue to play a sport he loves, but also to meet the needs of his contract. But in the WNBA, who's paying for this? With tiny contract salaries, it's not clear who is actually paying for these highly specialized fitness services. And they are much needed to mitigate against injury and to stay in top physical condition. Otherwise, it's like you're driving in the Monaco Grand Prix with worn out tires and no pit crew. Still think you're going to win that race? And with such necessary sports recovery services, it could leave even an average athlete with sizable monthly expenses just to keep their bodies injury-free because, well, think about it. These are people that during the sports season will train hard for several hours a day and travel for a full-on, intense, and physically punishing game, which could again last several hours, only to hit the road 2 days later and repeat it all over again. Many sports stars have permanent injuries when they retire, even with expensive aftercare and an army of highly trained specialists. To understand this further, I spoke with chiropractor, clinical specialist, and consultant Dr. Nicky Kirk of Parker Performance Institute in Frisco, Texas, who said that in general, a mid-level athlete playing in the major leagues with a private consultant will expect to pay $2,000 to $3,000 a day for specialist treatment. These types of services can include injury prevention treatments, use of specialized hydro pools, chiropractic care, nutritionists, and access to supplements, all of which is incredibly expensive. And Dr. Kirk said that many of these pro and semi-pro athletes seek sponsorship and donations to help cover these costs where their contracts simply fall short. He went on to say that for women athletes, this problem is particularly amplified because of the pay gap, and thus many pro female athletes, despite their tremendous talent, will have to find and hold down full-time jobs in the off-season. But some would argue that they, pro female athletes, are still paid a lot of money. Are they? No, really, I'm asking. Are they? A WNBA professional player, on average, may make around $102,000 a year. A junior rookie player in the NBA will be guaranteed a minimum of $1,017,000. Come on. And this is where Russia joins our story. In 2014, following in the footsteps of some of the creme de la creme of WNBA stars who likewise went east off-season, Brittney joined the UMMC Ekaterinburg of the Russian Premier League. This was not a new strategy, and Business Insider reports that for the past 2 decades, Russia has played host to many great WNBA stars, including superstars Diana Taurasi, Sue Bird, and Candace Parker, all looking to supplement their meager earnings stateside. In fact, more than half of the WNBA stars are reported as playing on foreign courts in the off-season because their U.S. contracts simply don't pay enough. And the Russian Federation has been more than happy to pay 3 and sometimes 4 times their U.S. rate, including all travel and housing costs and bonuses paid in many cases. So for 8 years, Brittney Griner flew to Russia to help her UMMC teammates smash it, and they won at least 4 EuroLeague titles in the time she was there, supporting them. In an interview before her 2022 detention, she was quoted as saying that playing overseas allows me to pursue my passion for the game while shedding light on the need for equal pay and recognition for women athletes. The pay gap in basketball is still a significant issue, and I want to use my platform to advocate for change. Well, and then it definitely did all change. Because on February 17th last year, Brittney, who had just arrived at the airport, the international airport in Moscow, to play in the off-season with UMMC, was detained on suspicion of drug possession. Airport authorities allegedly found in her luggage vape cartridges containing cannabis oil, which is illegal in Russia. Brittney was charged with illegal drug trafficking and smuggling, notwithstanding that use of these vapes is legal in many states in the U.S., and the small amount she had in her possession was never intended for onward sale. It was for her own personal use. She was quoted as saying that she used the oil to help with pain from injuries. Again, not unusual, and in fact, CBD oil of the same family is used in wide distribution across the US and the UK for similar conditions, including anxiety and sleeplessness. Importantly, Brittney's detention occurred 1 week before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and it wasn't for another 3 weeks before news broke internationally about the detention of an unnamed American basketball player. From there, things went very slowly, probably of an excruciating pace that none but Brittney will ever truly know, because it wasn't until May, nearly 3 months later, that the U.S. State Department officially released a statement that Brittney had been wrongfully detained by the Russian government, who were using her as a pawn. The Kremlin, of course, objected to that, but let's be real here. The invasion of Ukraine was the worst kept secret. For weeks leading up to the invasion, credible news outlets had reports of satellite images showing a major military buildup at the border. The Kremlin, of course, objected to that, but let's be real here. The invasion of Ukraine was the worst kept secret. For weeks leading up to the invasion, credible news outlets had reports of satellite images showing a major military buildup at the border. So at the time they detained Brittney Griner, the Kremlin knew that they were intending to invade Ukraine. Having been detained in a high-security jail cell versus house arrest, as was requested for the athlete, there began many more weeks of torturous waiting for the sports star. Brittney's trial finally began on the 1st of July, with very little public information about what type of evidence Russian prosecutors would bring against her. And so, after months of delays and extensions, Brittney, on advice from her lawyers, entered a guilty plea at her second trial hearing, but likewise stated there was no intent and that it was an innocent mistake during packing and she didn't intend to break the law. Then it got exceedingly worse for the sports star when a month later in August, while the war in Ukraine was in full battle, the judge convicted her of drug smuggling and sentenced her to 9 years in a penal colony prison. President Biden called the move unacceptable and demanded that she be released immediately. That, of course, fell on deaf ears, and after months of appeal efforts, the Russian court rejected her case and commenced her prison sentencing. And in November, Brittney was moved to a Russian penal colony 200 miles south of Moscow. Indeed, it looked grim for the athlete, even after she famously wrote to Joe Biden in a letter delivered by her legal team, pleading with him, "Please don't forget about me." What came after was the stuff of a Spielberg film when it came out that the U.S. and Russia had secretly been embroiled in nearly 5 months of top-secret, high-stakes negotiations to free Brittney and another American in exchange for Russian arms dealer Victor Bout. And on the 8th of December 2022, the deal was done, and Brittney alone was freed in a secret swap at an airport in Abu Dhabi. 2 months later, in February of this year, and back home on U.S. soil, Brittney was offered a new contract playing again for the Phoenix Mercury for $165,000, a fraction of what her male colleagues earn. $165,000, seriously. Now, again, that may sound like a lot to some people, but you can hire like a finance manager or a dentist in Middle America for that salary. No disrespect at all to either profession. But this is a professional athlete who is a 3-time NCAA title holder, an 8-time WNBA champ, a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, somebody who punishes her body physically for her career. Seriously. And some of the top players in the NBA, LeBron James as an example, earned over $40 million $40 million in the 2022 season alone. Brittney, top athlete in her sport, $165,000. It's difficult. It's really just hard to comprehend. Then in April this year, back in training camp, Brittney held her first news conference since her ordeal. And I've included part of the recording in the show notes. It's incredibly moving to see and hear it. I really recommend that you watch it. If you're not moved by it, well, I don't know. You're made of ice. That's all I can say. But a really moving news conference. If you don't have time to listen, here are the key points that stood out and as captured by CNN. Brittney said that many women's players go overseas for the pay and that she wouldn't criticize anyone for doing that. And she hopes the WNBA will continue to grow and that there will be change. She went on to say, "If I make the U.S. team, that would be the only time I'll leave the U.S. soil again, and that's just to represent the USA. The whole reason a lot of us go over is the pay gap. A lot of us go over there to make an income, to support our families, to support ourselves. So I don't knock any player that wants to go overseas and wants to make a little bit extra money. But I'm hoping that our league continues to grow, and with as many people in here now covering this, because it was like a standing room only crowd," she said, "I hope you continue to cover our league and bring exposure to us." But that is not where this saga ends. Oh no. So in the same week, this past week, I was celebrating the Nuggets' victory, despite the extremely disproportionate pay. I'm still happy for the Nuggets. They worked hard and they earned it. There was a lesser-known article that came out covering an incident that occurred last Saturday at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport when Brittney and her Phoenix Mercury teammates were confronted and repeatedly harassed by a right-wing media provocateur who was saying some wildly inappropriate remarks about Brittney's time in Russia. The police were called and they questioned the man, but the Phoenix Mercury decided not to press charges. And so listen, there are a lot of crazies out there, anti-fans I call them, but here's the but. This team and other WNBA teams should be able to travel with some even moderate level of security and protection from people like this. For pro athlete teams, the NBA and others, football teams, that means flying chartered planes. That means like they have the plane to themselves. And I don't mean owning the plane, so I don't mean private planes owned by the teams. I mean chartered, basically rented for their use, just like the men's NBA has been doing since the late 1980s. You can Google it. They've been doing it for like 40 years. Because, you know, they've got a lot of people. Why are they flying commercial? So, yes, so people for over 30 years, the NBA, well, 40 years coming up to, have the NBA has been flying their men's teams, coaches, doctors on charter flights from point A to point B. This should be standard for the WNBA as well. And I have to imagine these teams have agents who should negotiate a season-long deal on a good rate. Surely that outweighs the cost, the scheduling change, headaches, and security issues associated with sending your whole team through a commercial airport. So back to the gap. What contributes to the extreme disparity? Because the money has to come from somewhere. It's ticket sales, of course, but a big part of it comes from TV and other advertising media, brand endorsements, corporate sponsorship. And that's just the money that goes to the team. That doesn't include player product endorsements. The sponsorship disparity alone between male and female professional athletes is a significant issue that has been widely discussed in recent years. Despite the increasing popularity and success of these talented female athletes, they still face major hurdles when it comes to securing endorsement deals. And while some progress has been made, the disparity remains a significant issue, and addressing it will require a concerted effort from brands, athletes, agents, and the media. Tennis pros, the Williams sisters, have themselves spoken out about the difference. Venus Williams was quoted in 2017 saying, "I have to work harder and be better than male players because unfortunately women get paid less." Even farther back, Billie Jean King was arguing for equal pay in 1973 when she said equal pay is not a women's issue, it's a human rights issue. And I couldn't agree more. Now, some will say to me, hey, Kel, what about that women's soccer lawsuit, which so many of us heard about last year? So yes, let's spend a moment there. In 2019, the U.S. women's national soccer team filed a highly complex lawsuit that took 3 years of extremely expensive litigation before finally settling in February last year. And whilst the women actually lost their original case, the settlement and whopping $22 million payout and agreement to establish a new collective bargaining agreement demonstrated just how wide a gap it had been. The debate was around fair access to the same compensation, not just salary, but bonuses, which is where the real money came into play for a lot of these seasoned athletes. The women's team consistently argued that they were paid thousands less per game than their male counterparts, despite being, at the time, the superior team. The men's team failed to qualify in 2018 just before the women's team secured 2 consecutive victories. They argued that no matter how the salary model was sliced, the women's league had to win more and had to play more to get close to their male counterparts' earnings. In the end, they received sizable out-of-court settlements, as I mentioned, $22 million in back pay and $6 million in grants for players' service to the game post-career. And what can we do about it, you and I? Could we talk more about this? Yes, definitely. We should be talking more about it regularly. Watch more coverage of women's sport. Buy tickets to watch it live. Yes, and yes. If you enjoy the sport, the answer is, of course, yes. But incremental efforts are just that. Incrementalism, just as it is in sustainability efforts, actually diminishes energies that should instead be focused on galvanizing our peers in sport and in corporate bodies to ask the hard questions of our institutions that fund this disparity. We all know that big corporate has jumped on board the ESG and D&I bandwagon, that's diversity, inclusion, bandwagon, pushing hard to hire more females. Never mind that less than 1 in 10 ever get the senior leadership posts. It's another topic for another day. But you know, all those expensive corporate boxes and tickets they buy to entertain clients? How much of that investment is going to women's sporting teams? Seriously, I'm asking this question. How frequently are your corporate organizations investing in corporate boxes or season tickets for their clients from women's organizations, from women's pro teams? If an organization is truly keen to show its commitment to diversity and inclusion, half of their advertising and client entertaining dollars should be spent on professional women's leagues. If they're going to any sports, 50% of it should go towards professional women's leagues. Ask about this in your next town hall. Really, it's an important question to ask, and it's a reasonable question to ask. If your company is going to fly the flag of being D&I compliant and encouraging ESG and D&I, then this is a reasonable question to ask. If you like my show and want to hear more of these topics, please give me a like and follow us. Go to kellyconfidential.com and subscribe to our newsletter. And so as I reflect back on this week's hard-won and well-deserved victory for the Denver Nuggets, I wonder about Nikola Jokic and if he's managed to make it home to Serbia to spend time with his family. He had said in the press conference right after the game that he was really looking forward to going back home to see his extended family. And I think of his peer, Brittney, and how both are at the top of their game, both playing center, both just trying to be valued for their commitment to the sport of basketball. Yet the irony is just too much, really, to process sometimes, thinking of this man's need to leave his home country because the sport he loved didn't pay him enough there. So he sought his fortune in America. And then there's Brittney, an equally extraordinary but female athlete, already in America. but no such luck for her there. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks.